What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Unhinged Roundtable, where we break down all the controversial topics involving the Yankees. Sometimes we'll touch on topics outside of Yankees baseball, but today we're going to be touching on three Yankees who should be in the Hall of Fame who aren't. The first one that I think we want to touch on is Thurman Munson, who unfortunately lost his life very early due to a tragic plane accident. But Brandon, you want to tell us a little bit about his time with the Yankees?
Yeah, so Thurman Munson was, and actually is, one of the best catchers to ever play for the Yankees. He was the Rookie of the Year in 1970. A very consistent guy. He's that kind of stereotypical 70s kind of catcher, the guy who literally wants contact at the plate. He would play as many games as he possibly could. He also is an MVP as a catcher, which there are not many MVPs behind the plate. The Yankees actually
Buster
have two
Posey.
of them. Yes, Buster Posey.
Nailed it.
And Munson was
Not
just
sure.
getting into the end of his career in his early 30s when he lost his life. And if he had not gone in that plane, I do believe if he kept putting up the stats he was putting up, he would have been a Hall of Famer. But because of his career being cut short, he's now in the Veterans Committee, which he's not actually getting the votes he needs to be inducted. So he's kind of that he's in that no man's land.
Yeah. I mean, personally, like Thurman Munson is like way beyond my time. But I think even like looking back, you could still appreciate like just the career of someone like Munson, especially he wasn't able to finish his career in its entirety, because even at that point, like as a catcher ages, they could still DH or transition to first base. So we don't really know what the future could have been like for him. But looking at his numbers prior to his death, like you mentioned, he won MVP. He was a 7-time All-Star, 3-time Gold Glove winner, Rookie of the Year winner. But unfortunately, he only played 11 seasons, so he doesn't really have that catalog that many other Hall of Fame catchers do. So that's what discredited his cases throughout all these years.
Yeah, I kind of think that he should be in the Hall of Fame. The reason being is if you average out the seasons that he had, they're unbelievable, especially for a catcher. And to do that consistently for 11 years is pretty impressive. And like you said, if he had had a full career, he probably would have had ridiculous numbers and definitely been a Hall of Famer. So, I think you have to take that into account, the fact that his career ended short. But he still did put up enough numbers in my mind to make it in.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, next Yankee that we want to touch on who should definitely be in the Hall of Fame, and personally, this is the one that I kind of have the strongest case about. That's Donnie Baseball, Don Mattingly. Superstar for the Yankees during a time when the Yankees weren't that good, to be honest. There was a period during the 80s and early 90s where the Yankees just weren't the Yankees as we know. They weren't perennial playoff contenders. They weren't World Series candidates. A little bit about Don Mattingly. He was a 6-time All-Star, a 1-time MVP, 9-time Gold Glover, a 9-time Gold Glover. I'll say it a third time, a 9-time Gold Glove winner. And he was a 3-time Silver Slugger winner. He won the batting title in 1984. But like Munson, he just doesn't have that same body of work as other Hall of Famers, and that's because of injuries.
Best player in the 80s. If you asked a bunch of the players who played in the 80s who was the best player, and it was Don Mattingly. And if it wasn't for that freak back injury that he got wrestling a teammate, which zapped him of his power towards the end of 87, he would have gone on to be a Hall of Fame player because he was averaging 30 home runs, 45-plus doubles, and over 120 RBIs a season. He was the best player in baseball at the time. But injuries caught up to him, and he just never was the same.
Yeah, but I also think that playoff success factors into that as well.
100%.
Obviously, he was on some pretty bad teams, or pretty mediocre teams at least, and he never really got the chance to compete for a World Series. Some of the other guys that you could kind of argue might be deserving of the Hall of Fame, they have more playoff success, so I think that is a big factor holding him back.
He made the most of his first and only playoff series, though.
Yeah. When the Yankee Stadium
that
literally almost crumbled. I think that
Yeah.
that was the death note of the old Yankee Stadium. So the final guy we're going to be talking about on this list of 3 Yankees who should be in the Hall of Fame who aren't is none other than Mr. 61 himself, Roger Maris. Now, he's another one that he has a case, but there's other things that knock him off the ballot. Just some career accolades. The most thing that you really need to know about him is he did set the record for the most home runs in a season with 61. That was further broken by numerous players who were on steroids. So whether you want to mark that as an accomplishment for them, or whether you still want to consider Roger Maris the single season home run king, that's for you to decide. I'm not going to tell you what to do.
I'm kind of on the fence about him. I think he's sort of his body of work as a whole makes him a fringe candidate to be in the Hall of Fame. But I think setting the record with 61 home runs would kind of make him deserving of an actual ballot. I think that's the only thing that really puts him over the top because he, like I said, his WAR isn't really that great. He didn't hit a ridiculous number of home runs over the course of his career. He wasn't the greatest player ever, but he does have that one accolade that really stands above the rest. Now, what I will say is I don't think that his number should be retired with the Yankees because he only played a couple of years here, and obviously he had that great year, but are we really retiring numbers over one great season? So that might be a discussion for another time, but I think that he could be considered as a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys that he's best known for that one great historic season, and he was kind of like, even in baseball now, you have like those players that are constantly putting up good seasons, but they're just kind of in the crowd. Like they're great, like good, very strong seasons, but without those one or two breakout seasons, they kind of get lost in the crowd, and he's one of them.
Yeah, but he had a historic season. Yeah. I mean, like that's a record that stood for
he had 141 RBIs,
and ridiculous. It wouldn't have. It's insane, and it would have stood for longer had it not been for steroids. Probably, it might still be around today. So it's just a ridiculous stat, and I feel like that in and of itself warrants.
All these players definitely do have their own case. Now, honestly, when you look into the numbers of all of them, maybe they don't match up to be a Hall of Famer. To some people they do, to some of us they do, some of us they don't. But at the end of the day, all these guys no doubt had great careers. But when you cross that Hall of Fame line, it kind of gets complicated. So at the end of the day, all we could say is have a good night.